Perfect. Thank you so much. Quick shift and we're there. So yes, thank you to our trustees. Thank you to all of you, our members. And thank you to A&O Shearman for hosting us today. We were here 5 years ago, back in 2019, for our summit in July. Who was there in 2019? Yep, just a few of us. So a lot has changed since then, right? Although we have grown the membership from those 150 members that we had then to the 300 that we have today. Been a lot of staff changes in our member organizations. We've also had staff changes growing from just 2 of us, me and Sam back then at the summit, to what is now an amazing team of 15, which you saw through our, of course, great MCs and hosts today. And we welcomed 6 FEA babies, including Sam's newest one as well. So we've got something in the water. And we've been there for one another. We've navigated through COVID and the cost of living crisis, and we've seen the impact of that in terms of the growing gaps from cradle through to career at their widest now in a decade. But a lot hasn't changed. The diversity of the members in the room, businesses, policy, think tanks, education, charity, social enterprise, all coming together because we want to drive change. And also our vision. It was the same then as it is now. We want an education system where every child thrives, regardless of their background. And that is our stronghold as the Alliance. But why are we here? We're here for driving systems change together. But what does that actually mean? And I'm the culprit for this. So we haven't used the term systems change in our work at the Fair Education Alliance on purpose, because people tend to have varying different definitions of it, and it's so muddy. It can seem super long-term, and we're not actually tackling the issues today. Or because it's just this lovely theoretical framework that we just sit in a nice room and chat about while we drink tea, but nothing actually happens on the ground. Today, we want to change that. We think it's really important to get everybody aligned with what is systems change at a very foundational level of alignment. We know that this is not going to be super in-depth, but that is so critical given the scale and the depth and the overall gravity of the gaps that we're seeing. We've got to be able to work differently. So we want today to leave us with really concrete actions for each of us as individuals, for our organizations, and also for our collective. So I've been chatting with a few of you, and Vanessa just shared, I've come back from the Churchill Fellowship, which, Claire, are you in the room? Talk to Claire if you'd like to get funding to research internationally. So I received the Churchill Fellowship and did over 2 months of research in Australia, the US, and Canada, looking at how do they do this? How do they drive collaboration to improve education, employment, and life outcomes for children and young people from low-income backgrounds? And it was a wonderful experience. And there are 3 lessons which I just wanted to share today. The first is that as much as we'd like it, there is no silver bullet. No single phase of education, no single type of intervention that if we just had more of, this would tackle all of the inequities that we see in the education system. And what I found so fascinating was that where outcomes for children and young people had improved, it had been through organizations or collectives that were delivering and partnering with adults, parents, families, aunts, uncles, the same amount of services as they were with children. So that work with adults on employment, on housing, and needed to be a multi-generational approach, as well as the work in education to really see those outcomes. The second thing that's fascinating is that system change is not linear, right? We think it's A to B, we get in the room, we have our plan, and then we walk outside, oh my gosh, this is such a mess, right? But actually, that is so critical because education challenges don't need education solutions a lot of time. We have seen that the underlying root causes of inequalities in education often lie well outside of the education system. That might be in transport, it might be in healthcare. And we need, as an alliance, to be able to join up with those other sectors and work harmoniously like we saw those dancers this morning. And the third actually came at the end of my fellowship when I spent a few days with my father. He's a retired teacher and college leader, and I got this book from him. He gave me all of his old books that inspired his career. This is The Courage to Teach. So I sat there on his sofa just delving into everything, and in this book, it talks about how the demands on the teaching profession are causing educators to leave in droves. Now, you could say that that book could have been written a few years ago, right? We're facing the recruitment and retention crisis. But actually, that book was written 30 years ago. And so these problems have existed for decades. They have taken that long to evolve and to get ingrained and get embedded in our society. And there's not going to be an overnight solution. So, what we need to understand as a result of that is that we need to be able to be in this for the long haul. Being resilient, the fact that this is going to be a long journey, and like we've seen through individuals like Vanessa who spent decades on this, and Julia I think you have examples from the 1960s, right? Know that this is going to be a long haul, but that we can see change, but we have to make sure that we are relentless in those efforts. The second is we've got to be there for one another. Zulu wants you meeting, we want you meeting. We are the change, we are the people, so make sure that we're there for one another today and throughout this journey. And the third is that we have to take a systems change perspective, really tackling those root causes that underpin all of these inequities that we're seeing. So I'm going to introduce a framework that's been really helpful for us at the Alliance, and hopefully is a great starting point for all of us. I know we'll be at different phases of this, and we have some systems change experts in the room. We also have others who might not know anything about it. So just to give us this common understanding, this common language as we begin the journey. So the framework we'll use is about identifying systems change as shifting the conditions that are holding the problem in place. So this is really critical because you don't address the symptoms, right? You address those conditions that hold the problem in place. Great, let you capture the picture. There we go, perfect. And we'll send all those slides. They'll be on our QR code on that after this. So this is the water of systems change, and it is an inverted pyramid, and it has 3 different layers to it. And the top layer is what tends to get the most attention. That might be the most funding, it might be the most attention that's given to where we dedicate our resource, because it's the most easily visible. It's the explicit phase. And we have 3 different components. The first, policies. It will not surprise you, policies. One of the main reasons we are here today is for policies, right? To launch our fair education priorities that all of you have said are your recommendations for the new government. But we know that that's not enough, and our speakers before have said that. And so we can't rely that politicians and policies will change and make all of the outcomes better for young people from low-income backgrounds, because they haven't, and they won't. They're a cornerstone of it, but they're not the only thing that matters. So what else matters? Practices. We're going to be hearing from lots of examples. What are organizations and schools doing? How are they doing it? Absolutely crucial, as well as the resource flows. Where's the money going? What restrictions? Under whose direction, right? Really key areas to understand on that structural level. Then, jumping down one layer, we have the relational. So this is the semi-explicit. It does get attention, right? We talk a lot about shifting power, about building the relationships in our youth engagement work. But it's definitely not as much as the top. And here we have the 2 components of relationships connection. Who knows who? Who can rely on who? What's that quality of the relationship and that depth of the relationship like? And also the power. How are we acknowledging and also changing who holds that power? And then finally, at the very bottom, we come to transformative change. And this is where if you invested, we'd get a massive ripple effect. But oftentimes, because it's the implicit, it's not that visible, it's hidden, we don't tend to work on it as much, and we don't therefore tend to resource it as much. And here are our mental models. Our mental models, our mindsets, our values, our behaviors that influence how we do and what we think. And so the mental models is like a domino. You stack up this first domino of mental models, and it can tip over all the rest. And that's what we want to think about today. Yes, policies are a core piece of this, and this is a prime opportunity for us to seize, but what are all of the other components, and how are we all collectively working on those as well? So, that is Whistle Stop, like I mentioned. We're going to have a panel after this where we can ask questions, get nitty-gritty, but we want to hear from you first. And it's a lot to get our heads around, so we're going to have some individual reflection time with some nice beats in the background. And thinking about the following: what do you think are the conditions that are holding the problems in place, that is maintaining the state of inequity in education? So I want you to take 3 minutes right now, using this framework, whatever sparks you. You might choose to focus on one. You might try to get a few thoughts down overall. You've got your notebooks in front of you. So let's take 3 minutes, and we will then come back. Great, thank you. All right, hopefully just gave you a moment to gather your thoughts. Making sense of all of this is really important, or not making sense of it, right? Having it raise issues is absolutely crucial. So what we'll ask you now, I've already heard some whispers happening, is to be able to share that with somebody else. And so I want you to take 2 minutes each with a partner and share what was top of mind for you during that reflection. What are your thoughts? What do you think those conditions are that are keeping the inequities in place? So we'll do 2 minutes, and then I'll call us all together, and then we'll do a switch after that. All right? Amazing. I don't know if anybody got flashbacks to Grease, Rydell High, the announcements I used to play with the xylophone there. Yeah, some people who also love that musical. But no, that was also from my father. I told you, he gave me everything. He literally gave me everything that he used as a facilitator. Perfect. So we want to hear from you now. You've had some initial conversations and those thoughts bubbling. So we're going to go in turn about all of the different 6 areas, and we'll just do a collective raise your hand. We've got lots of mics that can pop around the room to hear your thoughts on each of those areas. So want to hear, what are the conditions that are keeping the problems in place? So let's start with policies. What do we think about policies? Anybody wants to raise their hand? We'll look for a few hands to start with and keep on going from there.
Hello, I'm Juliette Collier, Campaign for Learning. Obviously, the attainment gap starts before kids start school, so we're talking 4.5 months behind when they start, 12 months when they leave primary, and 18.5 months by the time they get to GCSE. So I think one of the things in terms of policy, obviously that's linked to poverty, but it's not necessarily. There are resources, but teachers are being asked to do everything. They're being asked to do, address poverty by having a food bank and all of those things. So addressing child poverty is a massive thing, but there are some small things we could do, which is joining up co-location of services and things like that, so teachers aren't having to do all of those other things as well as teach and help learning.
Absolutely. So amazing. Sneak peek at the Fair Education Priorities document, the demands on teachers, the join up of services, and starting early. And so those policies, what we need about prioritizing poverty, right? And a government that has not traditionally, over the past 12 years, prioritized poverty has made us feel some of the symptoms that we feel. Great. Others for policy. Who's got the mic?
Hi, my name's Emma Dickinson. I'm a policy officer at Liverpool City Region Combined Authority. One of the things that I feel are keeping the conditions in place, or keeping the problems in place with policies, is policies that are based on assumptions. So whilst we use evidence and research, etc., the reality of those policies when they are being implemented by a frontline practitioner needs to be explored further, and not just assumptions made about how policies are landed.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Emma. For anybody that wants to chat about Liverpool City Region, Emma's done some amazing place-based work up there with Right to Succeed. And yeah, so those assumptions, right? Basing it off of our own experience rather than thinking about what is it for the collective. Great. We'll take one more in the back there.
Hi, my name is Sagar. My organization is Holistic Economy. My focus is systems change and supply chains. My observation is policies and also resources. So policies in terms of whatever age of the children, whatever they've been taught, who is influencing it. And something I always remember learning about or listening about is, for example, kids who may be from the global ethnic majority, are they being taught something generic, or are they being taught something which is about their own history? Whereas versus when I speak to my friends in Kenya, then they've got a completely different perspective. Are the kids being given the experience of what kids in other countries are being taught as well, who are from their own similar ethnic backgrounds as well?
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, right? And that bridges policies and practices, really. What's the policy about the curriculum, but where there's room for innovation in schools to actually do different practice, what are they doing? Great, so let's go into practice right now. Kath, I think we had taken the mic from you. Do you want to take it back to share one on practice? Great.
I can twist it into practice, that's fine. It's overlapping with policy, as you said. I'm Kath Murray from Ambition Institute. So we were talking a bit about the thing that Gina just said, which was about how she'd found that the places doing system change well were also investing in the adults in the children's lives. And we were kind of talking about how if you've got parents who are really struggling with cost of living, with the basics, it's really hard for them to also have the time and the headspace and the resources to invest in their children, give them those enriching opportunities that often come at a cost. And then we were kind of talking about how if the place to do this and offer a wider education offer is the school, which the school can, shouldn't be put on the school, but it can be the place to do that, then we need to invest in schools and give them that wider resources around the school. If the school base is the place to do it, not expect teachers to do everything, but if the school is that hub, then really, really invest in that.
Great, thank you. And so actually coming into resources a little bit there with school funding, right? But I think it bridges all, and that's why this framework is super helpful. It's not gonna be a neat line, everything fits in a pocket super simply. There's gonna be some merging, right? Things aren't that simple, things are complex. And Kath, that's a few examples about the practice and working with adults, the funding that's required if you're gonna go deep, and how the policy then would prioritize it. So that's great. Let's go down a level, let's go to relational. So starting with relationships and connections, what are some of the barriers there?
Hi, I'm Roisin Killick from the Centre for Education and Youth, and I think what struck me most about this pyramid, which we've heard from a lot of people already this morning, is the need for the education sector to work with the other sectors. The issues of poverty aren't going to be solved in schools alone, and there needs to be really strong and dynamic leadership for people in the healthcare sector, housing, social care, and I think that's something that we've been lacking in recent years.
Thank you so much. Relationships, absolutely key. I know. Can you imagine what it might be for like a bigger fair alliance, what that might be? Paul's advised me against Fair Society Alliance, but it feels like that's what it's going towards. Great. And then we have an individual here just with the jacket on that's going to do the next one.
Thank you. I'm Ray Wan from Ormiston Trust. My comment on this would be to, I'm saying I'm preaching to the converted here with the room on the importance of working in partnership, but I think for some schools in particular, it's about giving them the capacity to utilize these partnerships effectively. I've, in my role, come across schools where they really benefit from inputs from external partners, and perhaps they would like to engage with external partners, but they physically just do not have the capacity, as we've heard, with schools having to take on so many other roles within the community. The staff do not have the mindset, the time, and the bandwidth to engage effectively.
Yeah, so that's the symptom, and so the capacity is one of the root causes, and what's causing the capacity crunch. So if you go one level deeper, what's causing the lack of capacity? Yes, the symptom is because they have too much, but what's underneath that?
Question for me?
Yeah, what's underneath that?
I think if you actually go down into the mindset, partly it's the mindset. It's to say, well, actually, this is the solution to my problems rather than just another problem on top. This is not an extra workload. Actually, this is something that can actually help to reduce my other workload.
It can help, yeah. But, right, barriers, we don't have the resourcing. Some of the schools who do partnerships really well, right, they have the funding for a school partnerships officer. For all our school leaders and teachers in the room, does your school have a school partnerships officer or something of the like? Yep, Tees Valley's got that. Great, right? That gives you an indication of that it's really important and you can prioritize it, and we'll hear from Sean next. But it's often not where the resourcing goes, and especially the funding that we were talking about. So, right, that interconnectedness. Cool. And let's come to power. Can I get somebody on power? Let's get Paul and Ogale, and then one more. So front row, Paul, then Ogale, and then back there in a striped shirt. Yeah, perfect.
Paul Drexler, SCI. First of all, I think the really good news, in the past week, we've seen a transformation in the reduction of barrier to progress, because I think we had an election with a Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Secretary of State for Education, the whole cabinet absolutely committed to the principle of fair education for all. So I think that is fabulous news and therefore a great opportunity. I think it brings with it three considerations. The first is, are we doing a good enough job making sure everyone understands the scale and extent of education disadvantage? In my experience, all those of us who spend time in this space assume everybody else knows. Yeah. The reality is there is not enough dissatisfaction in this country with our education system. And the second thing is to look at great stuff that works and replicate it. I loved Vanessa's example. If we could achieve a tripling in the number of young people doing STEM in schools across this country, we would be able to get this economy growing times 10.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, thank you so much, Paul. So fascinating, right? Who holds power? And we talked about policymakers not making assumptions as a big challenge in policy. How do you not make as many assumptions when you've got that diversity, when you've got that lived experience about those challenges you're seeking to address? So huge, and yes, very welcome to see that. I think it's over 60% of the cabinet come from that background. And also really great on comms. You've kind of come down a level on the mental models, right? But those values and behaviors, how do we shift those? It's about what information we have access to and how do we believe. So that's great. Great. Ogale?
Hello, my name is Gali. I am a young person who was on the Fair Education Alliance's Youth Steering Group for 2 years, and I'm now on their board of advisors as a youth representative. And I think what's so important about power dynamics, and something that I think is a condition that keeps these kind of problems in place, is almost making decisions and having conversations about young people without centering young people in those conversations. I think one thing that the FEA does excellently is having meaningful involvement of young people. We saw with some youth steering group members give their speeches at the beginning of the session, which I thought was excellent. So I think that's something that kind of needs to be continued, is involving young people kind of in meaningful ways, ensuring that they have their voices heard in decisions being made about them.
Yeah, absolutely. The power that it means for you to have that seat at the table and our responsibility in making those seats. Absolutely. Great. And let's get a person. We started talking about comms and influencing mental models. Anything else on mental models? Great. We'll just come to the person in the aisle there, and then in the front, Alison.
Morning, everyone. My name is Aziz Minot. I co-founded 2 to 3 Degrees, which is a delivery organisation. And we often find that, so we work in schools, outside of schools, and also with different businesses. And we often find that people are actually scared of young people. So that actually affects how they relate to young people, but also then the value that they think young people can have in a space. And so we're increasingly finding that actually we need to have more conversations about how do you actually engage with young people in a meaningful way, so that actually they're not scary to you and you're not scary to them. So yeah, Carl and I kind of work on helping people outside of this sector do that really well.
100%, absolutely. So it's mixing who holds the power. Dan, if we could bring it up here to Dame Alison, please. It's how do you do the power? You need to be able to get into those models. Young people aren't scary. So I think this really ties back. There's a question that's on our minds, which is, are we not shifting power because we're afraid of what would happen if we actually gave it to young people, right? And so there's a lot held up in there in our own mindsets. What do I potentially lose if it goes to somebody else. And it's shifting that to actually this, it's an asset. Here's how it can help. And you might not have as much power, and that's okay. Cool. Alison.
So, Dame Alison Peacock, I would like to say it doesn't have to be like this. So we need to shift the mental models. We have too much determinism within our society. We have language that talks about know your place, don't get above yourself. All of that language is meant to keep the status quo. So we need to disrupt all of that, alongside all the other things we've got to do, disrupting society's view of progress and equity. That's huge. Thank you.
Thank you. Woo. Amazing. It couldn't be a better way to bring that into this next phase, because we can't stand it, right? If we're here 30 years' time grappling with the same challenges, we're gonna go, what didn't we do, right? And so I think, Alison, it's this great call to action that we can change it, but it's up to us and it's our mental models as well. I mean, as you start going underneath it, I really, really encourage you to challenge and question your own mental models. And this quote is very, very pertinent. So everyone wants to change the world, but no one wants to change themselves, right? And it does start with us. What do we value? Where do we spend our time? Where do we spend our money? All of these things are so critical, because systems change can feel like this absolutely massive theoretical, how do we ever accomplish this? But actually, we are the system. And so that's where we start. And I think there's a big shift. Imagine you're on the motorway. You're driving home tonight. You get stuck in a gridlock. What are you going to do? You call somebody, you go, ugh, I'm stuck in traffic. No. Actually, how do we shift it? I'm stuck in traffic to, I am the traffic. Actually, I'm part of this. I do have a role in keeping up the systems that don't work. And I think if any of us walk away from today thinking that we don't have that responsibility, it would be a disservice to all of the children and young people, because I think we do have a huge role and we can't even improve on our already amazing selves. So that's a big one. But I know it can feel really uncomfortable, and our species tends not to seek discomfort, to put ourselves in situations that really challenge us and make us feel, ugh, this is icky. But that's what we need to do, is to seek out this discomfort. And unless we do, we won't have change, right? Imagine that seed coming through, uncomfortable, and then all of a sudden, poof, right? That's this change that we can have. But there are tensions, and I don't want to stand up here and preach systems change, because I told you at the beginning, we haven't talked about it and used that phrase for 5 years for a variety of tensions that I feel, right? But it's about managing those tensions while still going towards the goal, rather than staying in place. 3 different values from the FEA that I think can help us to manage this. The first, about learners, that we know that each of us individually do not have all of the answers. So we need to be curious and talk to others to get opinions that might challenge our own. The second is to be inclusive. Somebody here said, I think I'm preaching to the converted, right? All of us are here because of a shared vision, and we want to make sure that we're going outside of our echo chamber and getting the input from individuals who might not be, look, feel like us. And the third is honesty, because we have the opportunity to have some really honest and meaningful conversations. Obviously, everybody who jumped up and spoke, Dame Alison, who's saying this isn't enough, right? What can we do to challenge the status quo? We don't have to, we'll have compassion grounded in all of our work, but I think we've got a really good foundation here to be honest and challenge one another so that we grow together. So, I wanted to share another slide, so I'm going to do this really quickly. So before we go on to that, it's like, how do we do this? And there's an image, which we'll put up after the break, of the dominant system that we're currently in, coming up like this and then down, while the emergent system is coming from under here. And so I think our role as all of us, we often work in the dominant. We're just trying to deal with the tensions that we face right now and the challenges right now. We don't have capacity. We don't have the resourcing, right? We're just going to have others, other campaigning organizations, other think tanks. They'll do this, what could it look like, and help to create that future. But today, we all need to be part, yes, of the dominant system, but building in our activities and our resourcing to support that emergent system to happen as well. And that is the ask. What do we need to change in our own activities, resourcing, behaviors to allow us to do both at once, given the scale and gravity of the issues? So, a lot to take in. We've got time for questions and panel and hearing this all in action right after the break. But before we do that, I would like you to take in your notebooks, you should have a square piece of paper, any color that is there. It was on the front page. It might have fallen out. I can see yours is on the floor. There we go. Yep, perfect. All right. So why do you have these squares? We are weaving together our Fair Education mosaic today with all of your contributions. And Vanessa mentioned that we had the artwork from the pupils from a school down the road, Mulberry Shoreditch. You can see them. They're all outside. And we'd like you to take 3 minutes right now after having digested all of that and draw anything that represents, don't worry, there's no judgment in the drawings. Draw anything to answer the question, what does fair education mean for you? This could be a metaphor, it could be something real, whatever it means, however you want. And over the course of the day, we've got the contributions from the young people, and we've got our youth steering group and other young people here who will be helping us to create our fair education mosaic together. So we've got that collective vision. So we'll put on some soft music in the back and just take that. What does fair education mean for you in a drawing? Brilliant. I love seeing that. The visualization just gets our brain working in different ways, right? All of the different things. So outside where you registered today, you will see a few of these boards where we've already got some of the contributions from our young people. So after this session, there'll be a break. And if you could take your drawing, go out over there towards the reception table. We'll have them all spread out. And you can just place it wherever you want. We're keen to see what does our collective mosaic look like when we're in charge of seeing this for a fair education. Thank you.